Hey everyone, welcome back. For this video, I'm going to be walking you guys through assignment 5, where we're going to do some measures of central tendency. Now, again, the goal is to teach you how to calculate some measures of central tendency using R. My hope is that by the end, you'll know how to do some of that and sort of just, again, take a better look at your data. I am assuming at this point that you know how to open an R Markdown file, that you know how to use hashtags, that you know how to use basic functions such as the read SPSS command to read in your data, that you know how to use an assignment operator and like call specific data objects using the little $sign. I'm also assuming you know how to use the here package and that you can view properties of individual variables using either the sjplot_viewDF function or the attribute function. I also am assuming that you can make frequency tables at this point, and that you can make like a very basic ggplot plot if you're given the code. If none of this sounds familiar or you're still not comfortable with it, go back and review assignments 1 through 4. I am also assuming that you have read the book chapter for this week. So I'm assuming that you have read about measures of central tendency and that you've watched the video lecture. So again, if you haven't done any of that stuff, go back and do that first and then come back here. So part 1 of assignment 5.1 is just creating a new R Markdown file. I think by assignment 6, I stopped having that be its own part, but for right now, you still get the like super clean walkthrough version. So remember, the easy way in which we can set our working directory correctly is to open RStudio, not directly from our applications, but by going to a previously created R Markdown file in the folder that we want to set as our working directory. So you'll notice I actually already have an assignment 5 created because I was creating it while I made this assignment. But I'll go ahead and make another one. Go ahead and start from scratch. And so file, new file, R Markdown, assignment 5. Again, you can like manually set the date if you want. I love this function of use the current date when rendering the document. I just think that's great. And set it to Word because we're going to be using Word for this. Cool, now we've got a new thing. And get rid of all this garbage. And part 1, assignment 5.1. This is where personally I'm getting a bit lazy from typing this, and so I'm going to copy and paste this. If you're wondering how I did that without any right clicking, again, hotkeys, my friend. So you can do copy, but I'm on a Mac, so I use Command C to copy things, and I use Command V to paste things. If you are on a Windows, use Control instead of Command. Okay, part 2, assignment 5.2. So we're going to read in the use data set, and then we're going to make a frequency table. So we've created our second level header. Now we create our third level header called load libraries. Create our code block. Remember, this is a code block. Code blocks start with 3 backticks, and then this little curly braces with an R in between. We then have a space, and then the final line is another 3 backticks. You cannot put stuff on this. It will break the code block. These have to be separate things. Again, you can't put stuff here. You can, however, put stuff here. There are options. We're not going to get into that right now, but we have in the past. So the first thing we're going to do is load our libraries. There's this long list of libraries, but as you'll notice, they're pretty much the same as from assignment 4. And so again, laziness, copy and paste, double check that they're correct. So we got tidyverse, Haven, and I'm looking directly at the assignment here. You can see we need tidyverse, Haven, here, sjmiss, sjplot, summary tools, and GT. We got almost all of it. We're missing GT. Cool. Okay. We got to install GT. Now you can type this in here. Install packages, GT. Remember, when you're installing packages, you need to put the name of that package in quotation marks. If you do not, it'll get pissy at you. Error, object GT not found, because when you don't put it in quotes, it thinks that it is an R object, basically. And it's like, hey, your environment's empty. There's not a single variable called GT, because there's not. So you got to put it in quotes. Remember, though, you can also just put this over here in the console if you don't need a record of it, because ultimately you'd have to comment it out anyway. And so when I'm installing packages at the end of the day, this is kind of what I prefer to do. I think I've already installed GT before. I'll install it again, and then put that there. Okay. Now I have just deliberately made a mistake because I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to try to create an error as a teachable moment. So, okay, I've put my library commands in. I'm then going to create another third level header called read data into R, another code block. At some point I'll stop telling you this, but there is multiple ways to put in a code block. I am using a hotkey where I press Command Option I, and that inserts the hotkey, or that inserts the code block for me. You can also go up here and insert a code block that way. Note that it puts big spaces between your code blocks. If you have them smooshed together like this, your knitter, like the code might run, but knitter is going to throw a fit. It's not going to like that. So don't do that. Okay, so I got my code block, and we're going to read in our data. So youth data, read SPSS. I'm surprised it let me do that. Data sets, youth 0.sav. Remember, we can see our file structure here. So I've got here is assuming I'm in this top level folder, this Ducate L crim 5305. And so it is going to look in this folder for another folder called datasets, and it's going to look in that folder for a file called youth._sav. Error, could not find read SPSS, find function read SPSS. Some of you have gotten this before, and you're like, WTF is this? This means that you have not loaded in your library. And so I put all of these library commands up here. I actually didn't run them because I just was getting carried away. And once I realized it, I was like, well, I'm going to do it on purpose so you can see this. But like, you need to get used to trying to translate these errors. So it's saying it can't find this function. The most common reason is because you haven't loaded in the library. So let's go ahead and load all of these. Cool, so everything's in there. That's a funny thing. It gives you a lot of funny output. You can mostly ignore this. It's telling, like, tidyverse is telling you which packages it's installed, because tidyverse is like a package of packages. So it's saying, I have actually, like, even though all you did was load tidyverse, tidyverse have loaded the libraries or the packages ggplot2, her, tibble, tidier, reader, dplyr, stringer, and forcats. Here is also telling you where your file path, where it's assuming your file paths will start. Okay, so let's try this again now that I've actually loaded my libraries. And it works. We can take a look either by typing in youth data. You can see our data has been loaded in. Remember, you can also just, I've double clicked and that'll highlight your whole thing. You can also drag and highlight and run just that bit. You can do, it works the same if you do a run selected line. it'll show you your data, and that's kind of nice. Okay, so now we've got our data in. It's telling us, you can see here, there's over 1,200 observations of 23 variables. Okay. Now we're going to view our data. So another third level header called view data. Another code block. And we're just going to take a little peek-sees at it. And if we just want to take a little peek-sees at it and not look at all of this output, we can type head. And what this is just saying, hey, give me just the head of the data. Give me like the first 5 lines, let's say. There's actually a default number, which we'll see in a second. But saying oops. Show me the top. And so it's giving us the first like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's given us the first 6 rows and all of our columns. Now, something when you start running these functions is you should start thinking, I wonder if there's like other options that I could use. Like, could I have 4 lines instead of 6? Could I have 10 lines instead of 6? If you're curious about that, you can press this question mark and then type the name of your function, and it will pull up the help page for you. And what you can see is that there is a default n to show. So if you give it data by default, it will show you the first 6 lines. And, that's fine, but maybe we want more. And so actually, this really isn't in your assignment, but it's worth noting. You can actually, n is an argument that you could put into it. And you could say, I want the first 10. And now you get 10 rows. Say, I want the first 20. That's actually easier if we run it here. It'll give us our first 20 rows here. Let's say we want the first 3. Gives us just the first 3. In this case, we'll let it stay with the default, but you should get in the habit of when you're running these functions, start thinking about what you think it might be able to do, and take a peek at the help file and see if you can play around with it a bit. Okay, so we've looked at the head of our data. Something else we can do is we can glimpse at it. And glimpse is a tidyverse function specifically. So head is base R, glimpse is tidyverse. Use data. And so this doesn't actually give us the first couple of lines. So head's going to give us the first couple of lines. Glimpse is going to quickly show us all of our columns. If you're like, how many variables do I have and what kind are they? This tells us that all of them are coded as numbers. Even when you've got something like gender, which is just a 0, 1, it's not recognizing that as a nominal level variable. It's assuming that those are numbers. And so you have to keep that in mind later on. Remember, you can also just click and take a look at your data. So lots of ways to take a peek at it. And so we're going to go ahead and comment out this glimpse column. And we're actually going to start a new, well, I'll put it in the same code chunk because that's what I have you do. We're going to pretty this up, this head youth data output, because it's a little bit ugly like that. And when you knit your file, it's going to be a bit ugly. Instead, we're going to do head youth data. And then we are going to pipe that to the GT function. The GT function, you can check out the help file on it. It creates a GT table, and it basically is just like a prettier table. And so you can run this, and it gives us it's not that much prettier, but when you knit this thing, I'm going to go ahead and save because I haven't done that yet. 2023, 02, 03, Ducate. How am I naming these? Prim 5305, assignment 05. I'm gonna call it 0502 in case I mess something up. You would not do this bit. I just happen to have already created an assignment 5 from creating the assignment in the first place. So if we were to knit this to PDF or to Word, and remember you should be like knitting periodically so that you know that your code's running correctly. Makes it easier to troubleshoot. Pull this over here. So this is how it prints out. There are ways if we didn't want it to give us all of this nonsense that we can hide this, and one day I might have you do that. But for right now, I don't really care. Then reading in the data. And so here's where it gets interesting. So the output of just the head youth data is like basically the output of a tibble. It's this ugly garbledy-gook. And if we were writing a paper, this isn't helpful. Like I can't do anything with this. It's hard to see and I can't like dig around in it. The output of GT, however, gives us this. Now you might be looking at this and going, well, that's still ugly. But the point is, it is an actual word table, which means I can like do stuff with it. I can actually, you know, if I want to bold this entire top row, I can do that. If I want to, you know, maybe I want to get rid of this column, I can do that. Maybe I want to get rid of this column because it's, I don't even know what it is. You can start doing things with it because it is an editable word column. You know, I can just call this drinking if I want. And so that's one of the benefits when you're printing to Word specifically of using GT is it's going to give you a table that you can edit, which you will want if you're in the position where you're doing this and writing papers and whatnot. Okay, I'm going to click out of this. I'm not going to save, but that's the point of that. If you knit to something else like an HTML, it just makes a super nice graph or super nice table. Do that real quick so you can see it's like the difference between this, which is kind of cool because you can scroll through it, versus this. So it depends on where you're printing. In my PDF, which I don't have you guys do, again, it's more like the Word file, except the table is a little bit cleaner. Okay, so that's enough playing around. So now we're going to make a frequency table for our parent variable. So frequency table for parent 2 variable, like another code chunk, youth data, freq parent. Notice it auto-completes for us because RStudio actually loves you and wants to make your life easier. So we'll let it autocomplete for us. I recommend doing that because that way you don't mistype things. Because if it's telling you how it's typed, it's going to type it correctly. Whereas you might accidentally like put parent 2, and then it's going to complain to you that it's doesn't exist because it does not. But parent 2 does. So now we got a nifty frequency table. Now, if you're wondering, well, what actually is this variable? That's where the youth data view df comes in, because we can view the data frame and see somewhere that parent 2 means the parental supervision scale. So it's not number of parents you have, it's supervision. And so let's go ahead and plot this graphically, because that's going to tell us what we can do with this particular variable. So we're going to use data, pipe, ggplot. Yes, parent 2. And then let's go ahead and plot it as just a bar graph. Geom bar. Oops. Make sure you have your parentheses at the end. If I were to run it like this, it's gonna grouch at me. And actually, it kindly tells you, did you forget to add parentheses, as in geom bar? Why, yes, Yes, I did. Cool. So this is our distribution. And so at this point, we can go to our assignment and answer questions 5 through 8. So you can use the frequency table that you constructed to find the modal parental supervision score. So you can use this. The answer is in here somewhere, what the mode is. Remember, the mode is the most common score. We can also find the median parental supervision score. You might need to think about this a little bit of how to find the median parental supervision score. My 2 hints are, remember that the median represents the score at which 50% of the values fall below it, 50% fall above it. And you may want to read the final 2 paragraphs on page 86 of your textbook. You can also find the mean from this frequency table. And so I encourage you to do that. That I'm not going to show you. That's not a coding thing, that's a calculation thing, and you guys have the tools to do that at this point. Finally, I ask you, again in question 8, which of the measures of central tendency do you think is the most appropriate for the describing the distribution of parent 2? You're going to want to use this graph to help you, because this is going to tell you things about the distribution, and the distribution tells you things about which measure of central tendency matters. Okay, now we're going to move on to part 3. 3, assignment 5.3. I'm going to make some more frequency tables. And I'm only going to do a couple of these from a time perspective. Oh, hold on. The measures of central tendency for youth data variables. B77. How wrong do friends think it is to steal? I'm going to do youth data frequency B77. Now, the reason we're using the FRQ instead of the FREQ is because if you notice the difference, the FRQ gives us the mean and standard deviation of our variables. So even though it's not like there's things it doesn't give you, so there's pros and cons of each one. This is an assignment on measures of central tendency, and so it's nice to have the mean there. And so once you have made all of your frequency tables for each one, I then want you to plot your data. And just go ahead and plot them all as bar graphs, because that will work regardless of whether a bar graph is quote unquote appropriate. So for instance, just go ahead and do this, youth data, and then ggplot. Yes, oops. In this case, our variable is V77. And remember, you can put these on separate lines as long as the pipe is at the end and the plus is at the end. That's actually the value of the pipe. One of the values of the pipe is that you can get away with this. And then geom bar. Go ahead and run this. And this is what this V77 variable looks like. Again, we can go to our viewer if we're like, WTF is V77. How wrong do friends think it is to steal? That's why I've put it here, because the name of it is not very intuitive. Yeah, so here's the old one I did. And you can see I ran all these for like all of the variables, all this stuff here. Certainty of punishment, blah, blah, blah. You see it also in the outline for part 3, measures of central tendency, how wrong it is, gender, etc. Okay, let's go ahead and save again. You know what, we can even go ahead and knit to Word again just to make sure nothing is choking at this point. And yeah, it still pops out okay. Again, gives us our weird table. We can go ahead and probably comment. This always pops out funny. Go ahead and comment that view df command out because I don't like it. Scroll past, but if you do it, I'm not going to take off points. Here's our frequency table, and here's our nice little bar graph. And here's the other one. So it looks like it's working. We can continue on. Let's see. So now that you've visualized your RStudio, you can answer so you can use these frequencies to find the means. Where is it? This output. You can use this to find the mean. It's also worth noting that there are other ways to find the means. So means, medians, arguable, and modes of variables. We can type in mean of youth data certain. And that will also generate the mean of the certain variable of youth data. So at this point, you should have made frequency tables for all of them. And so you would have had this information elsewhere. So if you did youth data FRQ certain, it'll also tell you 10.54. It's rounding for you, but same thing. The other thing, I'm going to skim through some of this more quickly. If you're doing this I expect you to read through all of the instructions, but I'm going to skim through this. You can also do this for the median. So you can type median youth data certain and get the median. Oh, I have a typo. Because there is no function called media, but there is a function called median. And the median for it is 10. Note that with the means and the medians, you can't pipe. So I can't, stupidly, I cannot do this. It doesn't run because these base functions don't always understand piping. So we have to do it the old school way of typing in our data, putting a $sign, and indicating which variable we want. Remember, if we're just searching for it, you can press tab, or it will sometimes auto do it for you. And we can pick the variable we want. Cool. And so you can do this with all of your variables, and in fact, you should do that. The last thing to note is that there is, in fact, you might be thinking, well, how do we do the mode? Typo there as well. There is a function called mode. It, however, does not give you the mode of a variable. Instead, it will give you basically the mode of how it's saved. It's numeric in this case, which is not helpful for us. So if you want to know the mode of a variable, you should plot a frequency table or a bar graph and take a look and see which value is the most common in your distribution. There are also ways to write custom functions to do this, and this is what I do in my analysis, but we're not going to do that today. One of the other things you can do, again, these are all just different ways of getting like some basic descriptive statistics, excuse me, is you can use the describe function in the summary tools package. Summary tools, describe. Oops, I don't want to pipe this. Data, summary tools. Let's do certain again. That's going to tell us our mean. Again, same thing we got up here. Should be giving you, oops, let's change that variable. Should be giving you the same thing every time. It's also telling you standard deviations, which we'll talk about next week. It also gives you things like the mins and the first quartile and the median and the third quartile and the maximum value and the interquartile range and the skewness and all of this other nice stuff. So if you want a quick numerical snapshot of a variable, the describe function in the summary tools package is your man. So at this point, you're going to want to do all of these calculations for all of the variables that have been listed. So you're going to want to do it for the variables V77, V79, and gender, in addition to certain. At that point, once you've done all of that, you should be able to tell me the level of measurement of these variables. You should then be able to calculate the mean, the median, and the mode for each of them, and tell me the most appropriate measure for them. And the last thing you're going to do in this assignment, as I skim down, is to make a histogram for the delinquency variable. This is super short, sweet, to the point. There's just a little bit of code I give you. Plot, yes, delinquency. Remember, add the plus sign at the end if you want to skip lines. Geom histogram. Run that. And then I give you, let's see. The last thing I want to know once you've done this is what kind of distribution this has. So you're going to want to plot this to figure out the distribution and then answer that question. And then something new that I'm doing that I haven't mentioned on these streams because I hadn't chosen to do it at that point, page, is that you now have this other place to upload your Word document. And I'm doing this because it's actually a lot easier to see your Word document. It actually renders properly if you submit it as a separate assignment rather than as a file attachment. And so that's what you'll be doing once you finish and render your code all the way. So I realize that's a little bit long, and I've definitely skipped a couple of steps in terms of duplicate things, but practice makes perfect. So that's why you're creating multiple frequency tables, multiple plots, so that you get more comfortable doing it. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get. So now go back to your assignment instructions and read through them very carefully and try to follow along. As usual, if you have questions, please reach out to me in all of the various ways that I am accessible. Come to office hours, shoot me an email, tag me in the GroupMe, post on the discussion boards, whatever. So hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you all next week.